Welcome to Talkin Tullahoma. In the studio with me today is Senator Janice Bowling. Thank you for coming, Senator.
Thank you so much for having me. I've looked forward to this.
I'm very excited. I saw you the other day talking to someone else about a bill that you just introduced. You want to tell us a little about that?
I would love to. First, I'll back up a little bit, so put your seatbelt on and we'll run forward real quickly. A year and a half ago, if someone had said that I would be sitting here talking to you about Tennessee medical cannabis bill that I'm carrying, I would have said, well, you've been smoking something, because I would not have believed it. But after it was brought before the General Assembly last year, and I promised the House carrier, Jeremy Faison, that I would study it, I studied the medical cannabis. And the more I studied, the madder I got at Big Pharma. I truly believe, just as they misinformed us about the opioids, they have totally misinformed America about medical cannabis. Now, right now, 33 states, though, have realized the truth. In 33 states, they've exercised their 10th Amendment, and they have already passed legislation to allow their citizens to have access to medical cannabis. So 2/3 of America have access. It's time for Tennessee to have access too, and we've got to work together to make certain this bill passes this year. Now,
we've had other bills that come before the state before, and they didn't pass. I mean, what's going to make this one different?
Glad you asked. You know, I live in a town with rocket scientists, but what I did on this bill was not rocket science. I know the difference. What I did on this bill, there are 33 states that have already passed it, some of them as long as over 20 years ago. And I looked at the states to see what worked, why did it work, and then I thought, what would work in Tennessee? So it was a simple thing of aggregating the positive and eliminating the negative, just common sense, and putting together a bill not only that would work, that would have within it a structure and a timeline for a fast track, so that we would hit the points that have to be hit, and then we would be able to have this product to the patient as soon as possible. And so my bill is simple. It has differentiation between urban and rural, urban licenses, rural licenses, but also on the fast track there will be a commission, a standalone commission, just like the Alcoholic Beverage Commission. They will have a timeline where they have to create the applications for growing medical cannabis. They will have to be able to then screen the applicants, and there will be 12 applicants available that are called vertical integration licenses in rural Tennessee and 12 in urban Tennessee. So the people can simultaneously be buying the license to grow it, then to manufacture the product, and then to take it to market, to have a place to sell it. All of these things are kind of going to be plate spinning, but at the same time, so that we're not sitting there and then, well, what do we do next? And what do we do next? So all this can be moving forward. So within about 18 months, we actually would have medical cannabis available to the patients who need it in Tennessee.
Plus, what was you called it? You called it seed to product.
Seed to product.
So we know what we're getting.
Right. And it's trace and track. What we would know in Tennessee, we would know the seed, the clones. In medical cannabis, a lot of the plants are grown from clones. That way, they have the exact genetic disposition there, so that you'll have the exact ratio of THC, which is the one that people are concerned about, to CBD, which has been taken off the controlled substance list just within the last year. It was put on the Farm Act. It now comes under agriculture. So that's where it should have been all the time. Medical cannabis should be there as well, quite honestly. It has been used medicinally for 6,000 years. It's used right now in countries around the world. And for America, Israel has been receiving American tax dollars to research medical cannabis. So the FDA has forbidden that because it's on a controlled substance database, and instead in Israel, we're sending our tax dollars. They have discovered so many uses, and a Dr. Raphael Meshulam actually in '88 discovered CB1, which is the receptor inside of our body that we're created to receive medical cannabis. And that one received the THC. And then in 1992, he recognized the receptor for CBD, and that's called CB2. So we have an endocannabinoid system that actually produces some THC and CBD, but when we take in that plant, it goes and it attaches to those receptors in our body, the receptors along the central nervous system and along the peripheral nerves and the immune system. They have found so many applications and implications, and this is settled science. They've researched it for decades. In Israel, it's been legal for 20 years. They give it to their soldiers for PTSD, and that is a subject too, as we're talking about medical cannabis. This is going to help people get off of the opioids, and we can talk about that later, because that is incredible. It's the only thing we have now that can actually fight the opioid crisis in Tennessee.
And it's huge in Tennessee. Now, something interesting, back to your bill, happened just recently that kind of gave you a little push, a little encouragement there.
Tremendous encouragement. I went to Nashville Monday. We weren't in session, but I had work to catch up on, was in my office, and Jeremy Faison, representative, came in and said, Senator Bowling, this gentleman has come up from Alabama and he wants to meet you to talk with you about your medical cannabis. And I said, well, welcome, have a seat, let's talk. And he said, Senator Bowling, let me tell you a little bit about myself. I spent my career as an investigator for the Alabama Bureau of Investigation. Law enforcement was my life. And now I am a lawmaker. I've been a representative for 16 years. In 2014, I carried legislation that actually decriminalized CBD. Well, that seems archaic. Just 5 years ago, now you can go to the store. I have a store I like to go to down near the manicure pedicure place where I can buy CD products, and it's just something that we now can buy. But in 2014, there were children dying of intractable seizures, and that was a controlled substance. So many states decriminalized it. They didn't make it legal. You couldn't get it in your state, but if you had it, it would not be a criminal offense. And he said, along with that decriminalization, we gave $1 million a year to the UAB, University of Alabama in Birmingham, medical research. And we gave it to the Department of Neurology. And so they have been researching it since 2014, each year $1 million. He said this January they called me and said, Representative Ball, we need you to craft a bill. We've got to get this bill passed that will legalize medical cannabis. We have been overwhelmed with the positive uses for this plant on many diseases and conditions, and we want people of Alabama to have access to it. So we'll work with you to craft a good bill. And they began to try to craft a bill. Well, he said this past weekend they called him. Actually, the doctor over epilepsy in the Department of Neurology called and said, Mike, we don't need a bill. Just forget the bill. And he said, what? What's wrong? And they said, oh, nothing, but we need you. You live in Huntsville. We need you to go up to Nashville, Tennessee, and we need you to meet with Senator Janice Bowling. Online, we just found the perfect bill. It does everything a bill needs to do. It gets you the control product, and it gets you in there right away, and the patient will have access to it. It's the best bill we've ever seen, and we've been looking online. So we want you to go and ask Senator Bowling if Alabama can use your bill.
See, and Alabama and Tennessee working together, who would have ever thought that?
Who would have ever thought that? Who would have ever? But the neat thing about that, their session doesn't start till March 1st. And I have alerted my colleagues that if Alabama passes my bill before we pass my bill, there's going to be trouble.
That would be bad. We're going to take a quick break. When we come back, we're going to hear a little more about this. So stay with us. We'll be right after this.
This is your internet service at 10 meg speeds. This is internet service at gigabit. No other local provider can match this level of speed. Call us today to get the world's fastest internet.
Welcome back to Talkin' Tullahoma. When we left, you were saying something about Alabama better not pass this before Tennessee does.
I'm telling you, that's going to be worse than a football
I
game.
was going to say it'd be worse than a football game.
It really will, because this bill will save lives. This bill will bring a new industry into agriculture in Tennessee. This bill will be Tennessee specific and will help Tennessee. They're having to tweak a couple of things in Alabama, but they saw that our foundational oversight there is exactly what needs to be happening in a rural, relatively agricultural centric state.
Definitely like Tennessee.
Yeah.
Well, what can we do to help?
I'll tell you, we need the people to call. We need them to call the speakers of the House and the Speaker of the Senate. We need them to send emails. They can go online and read my bill. And when they go online and read it for themselves, it's 42 pages, but it's intuitive. It's very simple. It talks about the licensing, it talks about the agriculture, it talks about the stores where and the manufacturers who will produce the product. And importantly in my bill, 50% ownership by Tennesseans who have been residents of Tennessee for 5 years. That's key, because while we were down here being told that, oh, it's bad, it's bad, it's bad, 33 states are already manufacturing, producing, selling. Canada, Israel, Spain, I could name all the countries.
Keep the money right here in Tennessee.
I don't want to be the great sucking sound to be the money going out of Tennessee. I want us to be able to grow it, to produce it, to manufacture the product, and to sell the product, and to transport the product. So we've got to get ready, and I'm of the strong belief that CBD, just a little over a year ago, you know, was not criminal, but it was not legal. Now it's legal in Tennessee, and now it's legal across the United States because it was taken off the controlled substance and put under the agriculture by the Farm Act that just passed at the federal level. So when we realize that, I would not at all be surprised if the debunking of the misinformation about medical cannabis is going to be everywhere, and we will see that it is taken off the controlled substance. As a matter of fact, the World Health Organization, in their controlled substance, 4 is the highest, and it's been a 4, and they have just said they intended to put it to a 1. Now, in our DEA and controlled substance, a 1 is the worst, and they're talking about putting it down to a 4. So why they didn't use the same numerical things, but that's not surprising.
That's why we have
either.
daylight savings time.
That's right.
But now, being such a big agricultural state, we absolutely need to get on this. But it also, you know, that would be a good thing for us. But also being a big agricultural and a lot of rural in Tennessee, we have another little problem that's going on that this could possibly alleviate.
The opioid crisis.
Yes, ma'am.
It absolutely will. As a matter of fact, in the states that have legalized medical cannabis, 24.8% reduction in opioid deaths. Now that's the ones they can really track. But when you recognize that a lot of people who are addicted to opioids, they may not be dead, but they've lost their ability to live. They're in a stupor. They don't really enjoy things. They don't really feel motivated for things. And that shouldn't be. That we do not have to have opioids. The FDA just said in the last day or so that they realized they should never have said that opioids should be used for long term, that they need to retract that. Well, 20 years into it, I'm glad they finally figured that out. How many people have died? As I said, almost 2,000 a year in Tennessee. And our veterans coming back with PTSD, if their station states the 33 that have legalized it, they can be treated with medical cannabis. They come back to Tennessee, they're told you can't have anything but opioids. The suicide rate among our veterans is very high.
I've heard
that. And a lot of that is directly connected to the opioids that they're being given in order to treat a condition that they acquired while serving us. That's unconscionable. As I look at the opioid crisis too and recognize 24.8% reduction, but equally important, not equally important, but 14% reduction in Medicare Part D. So that's the pharmaceutical part of Medicare, and we're not prescribing in those states, they're not prescribing it to the senior citizens like they are in Tennessee right now. And how many senior citizens do you know that have been given, if their toe hurts, they'll give them opioids? I mean, they just give them for the least thing, and the cure is much worse than the condition. We do not want people to get addicted, and they will be addicted, and they could overdose. And did you know with OxyContin, if you say, oh, I don't want to take the whole pill, I think I'll cut it in half, OxyContin actually has a time-release component. You could have a lethal dose with a half a pill because it can release so much more than you're supposed to have in a short period of time. It will release 12 hours worth in a short period of time.
I did not know that.
And most people don't. And when you hear a lot of the overdose deaths, I think it's where people have just accidentally thought, well, I'm kind of hurting, but I don't want to take that whole thing. I think I'll take half of it. And if they haven't eaten, if they're a small person, if they're a young person, that can be a lethal dose.
If they're not, I mean, I barely take aspirin, something, and it.
Exactly.
And I can't even take pain pills when we have to just give me some Tylenol.
I do not take them. As a matter of fact, I have a friend from Morgan County. She was a Hatfield, as in Hatfields and McCoys. And I broke my shoulder several years ago. They sent me home with a sack full of Oxycontin and hydrocodone. And after a couple of weeks, I just felt like I was watching my life. It was the most bizarre feeling. I went off cold turkey. I had been taking half as many. Thank goodness I didn't cut them in half. I just took 2 instead of 4, and I stretched out 8 hours instead of 4 hours. So I was taking maybe at that rate a fourth of the dose. But it was doing a terrible thing to me, and when I got off of it, I had sweats, I was clammy, had tremors.
Withdrawals.
I had trouble. It was withdrawal. 2 weeks. And I was taking half as much as I'd been told to. So I know personally how addictive it is in children with a sports injury, a lady in pregnancy. And my bill, that's one thing I will say, my bill does not allow a pregnant woman to have medical cannabis. A pregnant woman really has to be so careful about any medication, and that's why almost everything you get over the counter says, do not take
Take
during
if you're
pregnancy.
pregnant.
And so the medical cannabis, that's one of the things that says you cannot do that. But about 23 conditions where you can use it, from epilepsy to ALS to Parkinson's disease to rheumatoid arthritis to, and I never can pronounce this one, sclerotic. It's sclerosis.
Yeah.
And so it is the arthritis that starts as a skin rash and then it goes inside with the inflammation.
Yeah, it's like muscular sclerosis or
just similar in muscular sclerosis. So all of these things, neuropathy, they can be helped by this plant that God placed on this earth and people have used for 6,000 years until Prohibition in America and until Big Pharma did not want
I don't want to address Big Pharma for just a second. It's not only is it going to, it could potentially put money back in the pockets of people from Tennessee, alleviate all these things we talked about, possibly lessen the opioid epidemic.
Definitely lessen, according to statistics.
There's a criminal element it could cure as well. I don't know if you remember the big ring that was here in Tennessee and Kentucky, where they were actually, I think it was in Grundy County, which is not that far from here.
Right.
They were breaking into pharmacies and they were stealing those opioids, and they were selling because they do have this huge street value.
Tremendous street value.
So I mean, the criminalization that they've put on medical cannabis really belongs on the opioids.
On the opioids, on the heroin, on the fentanyl. Those are deadly, and they're street drugs. And people say, oh, but medical cannabis could be a gateway drug. Think about that. Now just think about it. Gateway. That's something trying to get you onto something that's very harmful for you. So the black market will take cannabis because it does not have the huge effects that heroin and fentanyl. And fentanyl, if you take that pure, it will kill you.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, you cannot touch fentanyl. It can kill you through your skin.
Yeah, I've heard that the absorption
It
of the skin.
actually is. When we have our TBI raid a place, they have to be in full hazmat gear because that is deadly. No, right now, when you look at medical cannabis versus all of those FDA approved, and you watch TV and you see those FDA approved medicines could cause dizziness, heart attack, renal failure. It could kill you. Every one of them, you know, and the probability, I'm sure, is low. I hope it's low. But medical cannabis, you know how many deaths from medical cannabis? DEA number. 0.
Really?
0.
I just can't imagine. I mean, because I think probably, can you even overdose on medical cannabis?
You cannot overdose. You will not die from an overdose. If you overdose, you could get dizzy, you could get nauseous, you could get a headache, or you could get sleepy.
And you could get that from just a regular dose of these other ones.
I can do that from sitting in meetings someday.
We're going to take a quick break, but when we come back, we've got some other things we want to share. Okay. So stay with us. We'll be back right after this.
This is your internet service at 10 meg speeds. This is internet service at gigabit. No other local provider can match this level of speed. Call us today to get the world's fastest internet.
It's time for every family and business in Tullahoma to go green and recycle. Tullahoma Public Works makes it simple and easy to recycle. Just place your recyclable materials, paper, plastic, aluminum, and cardboard beside your garbage container on the same day your garbage is picked up. Your recycled materials don't have to be in a fancy container. Recycling is not only the right thing to do, it makes sense. Recycling pays. Paying to bury our garbage costs each of us. Please do your part. Let's go green, Tullahoma, and recycle.
Does your family?
Welcome back to Talkin Tullahoma. When we left, we were talking this overdose, or if you were to take too much medical cannabis, you really, the effects are almost negligible.
They are almost negligible, just like when Colorado, when they passed medical cannabis, not recreational, we're not talking recreational, when they passed medical cannabis, they, along with many other states, law enforcement was queried, what difference? And they said it's been a non-event. It's a non-event. People are getting help for medical conditions. They're getting drugs right now that can cause all sorts of negative side effects. So you can't compare them. I spoke with a doctor the other day, and he said, Senator Boland, I respect you so much, but I just still have a few apprehensions. And I said, the science is settled. I said, Israel has been using our money to do the research. It's scientific research. People say, oh, it's not real. It most certainly is. And in America now, UAB, since 2014, has had a waiver to do research. So we actually have research that is taking place on a limited basis in some of the states in particular, too, that have already legalized it out of the 33 states. But I told the doctor, I said, sir, when was the last time you prescribed an opioid? Did you not have apprehensions about that? You know that can kill people.
Oh, absolutely.
You know that can make them addicts. You know that can ruin their lives. How could you say that's okay with you, but to give them something that might make them nauseous, and that's a problem for you? I said, with all due respect, I say you do not have intellectual honesty or moral consistency if you can say that and not see the contrast rather than the comparison. And I heard another pharmacist say, oh, I consider medical cannabis just like an opioid. And I said, then you need to research, because I wouldn't say that out loud. That shows that you're grossly ignorant of what it is.
Is that what it is? They just have this image of medical
60s,
cannabis?
And they think of the 60s and people, and when you think of the people that were high, they had LSD, they had all of these drugs. It wasn't the marijuana.
No, it was probably the LSD that they were overdosing on, I'm thinking.
LSD and all the different things that were actually psychedelic things that just had them crazy.
Which ironically started as a lab experiment.
Yes.
I was really surprised to find out that University of Alabama at Birmingham, you said, how long have they been researching this?
Since 2014, they've been getting $1 million a year from the General Assembly down in Alabama, and they have researched this in the Department of Neurology, and it was the Department of Neurology that called the representative last weekend and said, you need to go to Tennessee and meet with Senator Janice. Her bill is perfect. It covers everything it should. And that's not something that I'm saying to draw attention to myself. I'm saying that's how common sense it was. If when you take the truth and put the truth together, this worked, this worked, this worked, this is why, then you end up with a positive bill.
But you said too, you went and looked at everything that was out there, and it's not like you just sat down one night and thought this up. I mean, there's lots of research that went into this.
And I have called on people from other states where it has been successful or not been successful. I mean, this is something that did not just say, oh, I think I'll do this. This tried to make sure this fit with this, and this, it was building blocks. It was Legos.
It's almost viral. We've heard, our producer has heard the people from other states that he knows that have seen your name in Tullahoma and have called him and asked him about it. So, and UAB, I mean, that's a half a decade of research they've been doing. We need to get we need to get on the stick here if Alabama's already been doing this for 5 years.
I know it. It's embarrassing, Tennessee. We pride ourselves in so much.
I'm being just ahead of Alabama.
Yeah, there you go. And if we want the University of Alabama in Birmingham to up us, then shame on us. But the point is, you know, we're teasing about this some, but just think, right now, there's someone dying. When you've got 2,000 deaths a year, how many a day is that?
Really?
And so when you're looking at that, some families grieving, I mean, it just breaks my heart to think that we have allowed that because we've believed the lie. We've believed the lie that opioids were good, and we've believed the lie that medical cannabis is bad. And we've got to come out of those dark ages. We've got to get on with it. And if in fact, which I believe will happen in a few years, medical cannabis is taken off Schedule 1, it's put down probably at a Schedule 4 where it belongs, because it is not dangerous. When you do that, then we in Tennessee, if we get this bill in place, we will be ready to roll to really get the product without any of the inhibitions that we have right now. And in Tullahoma, Tennessee, I have found out that with CBD, I'm very proud to say 20 doctors in Tullahoma are referring their patients to CBD. They can't prescribe it. It would impact their DEA license even with the CBD, I guess, but they can recommend it. And I applaud those doctors for recognizing, you know what, it's making a difference in my patients.
Sometimes you have to think outside the box.
You do, and you have to. FDA is admitting they were wrong, that it should never have been long-term for opioids. And so, now, let me finish your sentence. My husband says I don't finish my sentences. Sometimes my brain starts going too fast. But when you look at how they will acknowledge that they were wrong about opioids in long-term use, but when they do that, because of what they have done, that's 20 years worth of deaths, suffering, misapplication of a product. Are they doing that because they should do that? Are they recognizing that that cash cow is about to go and they're trying to save face? And I would never have discredited them until I carried the legislation that repealed the Intractable Pain Act of 2001, which was the legislation that was passed in Nashville, Tennessee after 11 minutes of deliberation to say that there was a new wonder drug, and if a patient had pain, the patient shall be given OxyContin. Whoever heard? But Purdy Pharmaceutical went around, spread that lie. Legislators bought into it just like that, quick to believe the pharmacist, but slow to believe the truth with regard to a plant that could have so many wonderful applications.
Well, I hope some people reach out and we're educated today. That's all the time we have. Thank you for joining us here on Talkin' Tullahoma, and we'll see you next time.